bones of the laws are somewhat similar with respect to, giving consumers a certain baseline of rights, right to access, right to know, delete. We have portability. We're seeing between CPRA and Colorado and Virginia, the gap between the CCPA and the GDPR closing with respect to broadening the additional rights, correction, deletion, et cetera. So you have kind of a baseline there. Then you have some similar business obligations. Again, looking a little bit to GDPR, pulling in concepts like purpose limitation and data minimization. So broad strokes, these laws have a lot in common. But when you get to the weeds, as companies are wont to do, and particularly in this space where data is so important, they don't quite exactly overlap. So there are exemptions that are broader in certain places. So for example, in Colorado exempts data covered by COPPA. So if you deal in children's data, that becomes quite important. There's exemptions in Colorado for internal research. It's kind of digging into, well, we have this broad pool of data. I know a lot of the participants on this call are focused on advertising, but how there are so many different data streams and parsing out each category of data, how it's impacted by the law and each data use, I think is where, some of these exemptions come into play. Even things like the deletion exemptions aren't exactly the same. You really have to go in line by line and understand, well, when do we have an obligation to delete? And that impacts how you operationalize the deletion obligation. We look at things like, we have selling, we have sharing, we have opting out of cross-contextual advertising, we have targeted advertising, matching those up and figuring out, well, what does that mean and what are the commonalities? Can we create some commonalities? We can have a common approach. All of that becomes a challenge. So it's really getting into the weeds of what these laws require. And of course, one of the bigger pieces that's gotten a lot of attention is the requirement to opt in for the use of sensitive information in Virginia and Colorado. So there's this patchwork gives a foundation that you can build on. But I think for a lot of companies, it's figuring out, well, what does this mean in practice? And once I get into the weeds of this law, what does it mean for the business and how we operationalize?